I still remember the exact second my world split in two. My name is Lauren Mitchell. I'm 34, living in Boulder, Colorado. By day, I'm the CFO of a luxury interior design firm. By night, I'm the wife of Brandon Mitchell, the man I met in college, married for 6 years and loved for 11. I used to believe nothing could destroy the bond we had. Until that morning. It was early. The soft golden light of the Colorado sunrise poured through our bedroom window as I stood in the bathroom brushing my teeth. The faint hum of the shower behind the frosted glass door masked the sound of my quiet breathing. Brandon had left his iPhone on the marble sink, something he almost never did anymore. As I reached for a towel, the screen lit up. A message preview popped up in bright white text against the dark screen. Can't wait for the weekend. Grand Lake. The silk set. Counting the hours. My hand froze midair. I didn't even recognize the sender's name. I stood motionless, toothbrush still foaming in my mouth, staring at the words as they burned into my mind. I didn't unlock the phone. I didn't need to. The numbness spreading through my chest told me everything. This wasn't suspicion anymore, it was confirmation. The pieces I had been too scared to connect suddenly fit. The late-night business trips, the sudden password changes, the cold distance replacing the warmth in his eyes, and now, the final undeniable proof. My feet were cold against the tile. The sound of water streaming down Brandon's back felt distant, like I was standing outside of my own life looking in. I rinsed my mouth slowly, dried my hands, and stared at my reflection. My face was calm, almost detached. There was no trembling, no tears, just the icy clarity of betrayal. I applied my makeup like any other day, but every brushstroke felt surreal, like I was preparing for the role of a woman I no longer recognized. As I stepped out of the bathroom, Brandon stood in front of the mirror, tying his navy blue tie like nothing had happened. He glanced over his shoulder and smiled at me casually. "I've got a client conference in Colorado Springs this weekend," he said, adjusting his collar. "I'll be home late Sunday night." I nodded, my voice hollow. "Don't forget a coat. It gets cold up there." I didn't mention the message. I didn't ask who was counting the hours. I had no intention of breaking his perfectly rehearsed performance, not yet, because in my mind, something far more dangerous was already taking shape. I was done being the passive wife, hoping for explanations. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't confront him tonight. No, not until I had a plan. The days that followed passed in a blur of routine and silent observation. I didn't need to confront Brandon to know the truth. I already knew. I watched as he meticulously shielded his phone like a vault, took it with him even into the shower, and typed in new passwords on both his phone and laptop with a paranoia that hadn't existed before. He had become so careful, so methodical, and that only confirmed my instincts. My heart didn't break again. It had already been quietly shattering for months. I stopped second-guessing myself. I remembered every excuse. The sudden out-of-town client meetings, the late nights at the office, the weekends where I waited alone, staring at my untouched dinner with only the dishwasher humming in the background. I used to tell myself, "Don't be dramatic, Lauren, he's just tired. Don't ruin things over a look." I swallowed those doubts for years, but not anymore. That Thursday night, after Brandon returned from his usual tennis match, followed by 2 whiskeys, I knew he would sleep like a stone. The scent of sweat, whiskey, and shampoo lingered in the air as he lay motionless in bed. I waited until his breathing deepened, steady, untroubled. Slowly, I reached over, gently tilted his right hand onto the phone sensor. Click. The screen lit up in the darkness like an exposed wound. What I found was worse than I had prepared for. The message about the silk set was only the surface. There were dozens of others, stretching back months, forming a grotesque love story behind my back. Her name was Elise Carrington. She wasn't some young college fling. Elise was 38, sharp, beautiful, with a polished career as a medical device sales rep based out of Colorado Springs. She was confident, experienced, married, and her messages to Brandon left no doubt about their intimacy. One phrase caught my breath. Nathan will be in Salt Lake City for a conference. The cabin is all ours. Nathan? I scrolled further. There he was, Nathan Carrington, Elise's husband. The man she was betraying along with me. I did what any betrayed woman would do at 2 a.m. with her world collapsing. I Googled him. Nathan Carrington, 41. Residential architect, Denver. Specializes in sustainable design. His firm had been featured in multiple Colorado architecture magazines. His LinkedIn profile showed a tall, lean man with soft gray eyes, a trim beard, and a tired but kind smile. My chest tightened as I stared at the screen. This was the man Elise was lying to while sneaking away with my husband. I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table all night rereading the messages, my fingers ice cold against a glass of water I could barely drink. I drafted and deleted the same text to Nathan at least 15 times before finally hitting send just after sunrise. Hi Nathan, my name is Lauren Mitchell. I believe your wife, Elise Carrington, and my husband, Brandon Mitchell, are having an affair. If you're open to a conversation, I can provide you with evidence. My number is 720-555-8237. My hand shook as I set the phone down. 3 hours later it rang. His voice was deep but low, calm on the surface, but with an undeniable tremor beneath. Is this some kind of joke? I wish it were, I whispered. I have the messages, photos, their plans for Grand Lake. A pause, so heavy it almost hurt to breathe. What do you want to do? I stared at the sun slowly rising over the Rockies, my decision already made. Do you want to meet them there before the wine gets uncorked and the lies start again? Another long breath, then quietly, okay, but I want to see what you have first. We agreed to meet halfway at a small cafe in Idaho Springs the next morning. I stared at the text confirmation for a long time, heart pounding. I didn't know this man. I didn't know how he'd react. I didn't know what would happen. I only knew one thing. I wasn't going to face this nightmare alone. The next morning, I arrived early at the small cafe in Idaho Springs, a sleepy mountain town nestled between towering pines and icy rivers. I chose a corner booth facing the parking lot, my heart pounding at every car that pulled in. I had no idea what Nathan looked like beyond a single profile picture, but when he stepped inside, I recognized him instantly. Tall, lean, dark wool coat, quiet intensity. His eyes scanned the room and landed on me with a flicker of recognition. He walked over and sat across from me without a word. No small talk, no pleasantries, just raw, silent pain hanging heavy between us. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. Without speaking, I opened the message thread between Brandon and Elise and slid it across the table. Nathan's hands tightened into fists as he scrolled. Page after page, the flirtations, the plans, the photos. Then he froze. One photo stopped him cold. Elise's perfectly pedicured feet resting on a rustic hardwood floor. His mouth tightened. I designed that floor, he said hoarsely. That's our cabin at Grand Lake. I stayed silent. The color drained from his face as he sat back, shoulders heavy with devastation. I thought she just needed space. I offered counseling. I offered everything. His voice cracked. Now I know why she refused. For nearly an hour, we sat across from each other, two strangers bound by shared betrayal, dissecting the shattered pieces of our marriages. When the last text was read, Nathan closed his eyes and took a long breath. I still have a spare key to the cabin. Elise doesn't know I kept it. I nodded slowly. Brandon thinks I'm going to a financial conference in Aspen this weekend. He has no idea I'm anywhere near Grand Lake. Nathan stared at me, his face hardening. Then we get there first. No screaming, no drama. We let them walk into the truth they've worked so hard to avoid. A slow, almost grim understanding passed between us. There would be no yelling in the streets, no throwing punches, no humiliating social media posts. Just presence, a timed, perfect collision of reality with a fantasy they thought they controlled. We mapped out the plan like two quiet conspirators, two people who had already lost everything but refused to lose their dignity too. We'll meet again Sunday morning at the cabin. They're supposed to arrive at 6 p.m., Nathan said. I nodded, staring into my untouched coffee. Then Sunday it is. As I walked out into the cold mountain air, I exhaled for the first time in hours. The weight hadn't lifted, but it had shifted. For the first time since I saw that message on Brandon's phone, I felt something stir in me that I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. Sunday arrived with a cold sharpness in the air, the kind that slices through even the thickest coat. I drove toward Grand Lake under a pale gray sky, winding through towering pine trees and icy blue waters. As the cabin came into view, my stomach tightened. There it stood, beautiful and deceiving, the scene of so many lies. Nathan's silver SUV was already parked by the front steps, lightly dusted with pollen. Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar and faint traces of Elise's expensive perfume. Nathan stood by the large living room window, sipping coffee and staring out over the frozen lake. He nodded at me, no words necessary. We were no longer strangers. We were allies now, bound by something far deeper than betrayal, truth. Did you sleep? He asked quietly. I shook my head, dropping my overnight bag onto a wooden chair. Not really. You? He smiled faintly. I'm used to sleepless nights. Architects do their best work in silence. We sat together in that silence for a long time. There was no awkwardness, just the mutual understanding of two people wading through emotional wreckage. I stared at the long dining table in the center of the room, remembering the last time Brandon and I had come here. 3 years ago. It was supposed to be our weekend away after a stressful quarter at work. It was also the weekend I lost our first child. Nathan's eyes softened as I spoke. This place holds every kind of memory for me, good, terrible, all mixed into the same walls. He nodded, his voice distant. Elise wanted kids too. After 2 miscarriages, she stopped bringing it up. I thought it was grief. I never thought it was someone else. Neither of us cried. There was only the soft hum of the electric heater and the faint wind brushing past the trees. Do you think we're going too far? I whispered. Nathan shook his head firmly. If this was revenge, yes. But this is exposure. It's a mirror. They wanted to play pretend. We're here to remind them that they don't get to rewrite reality. I nodded, swallowing hard. He was right. Together we prepared the space like staging a performance. Nathan wiped down the long oak table where Brandon and Elise had once planned their secret work weekends. I uncorked a bottle of Elise's favorite Cabernet from Nathan's car and set out 4 crystal glasses, the same kind Brandon insisted on bringing to relax like civilized adults. 2 chairs were angled perfectly toward the door, forcing Brandon and Elise to face us the second they walked in. The lights were dimmed to a soft amber glow, not harsh enough to provoke anger, just bright enough to catch every micro-expression when the truth arrived. How do you think they'll react? I asked as we stood back and admired our chilling work. Nathan exhaled slowly. Elise will cry. Brandon, I don't know. Rage? Denial? Maybe bargaining. But what I do know, he's not ready for both of us. The hours crawled by. We talked, not about the betrayal, but about ourselves, the people beneath the armor heartbreak had forced us to wear. I told Nathan about Brandon's canceled family vacations, the late-night Uber rides to neighborhoods 40 minutes away, and the gut-wrenching self-delusion I had forced myself to believe. He must have just stopped at a bar with friends. Nathan shook his head bitterly. I caught Elise texting once in bed. She smiled down at her phone and then snapped it shut when I rolled over. I knew something was wrong. I just chose to trust her anyway. The clock read 4:12 p.m. I adjusted the last wine glass. Less than 2 hours. Are you scared? Nathan asked. I stared at the dimming lake beyond the window. I'm not afraid of the truth. I'm only afraid that I might forgive the unforgivable. He looked at me solemnly and nodded. I'll remember that. We stepped out onto the porch, the cold air stealing our breath. The lake was still, an eerie glass sheet reflecting the darkening sky. Time itself felt frozen. At 5:57 p.m., the crunch of tires on gravel echoed through the trees. Nathan stiffened. I said nothing, only nodded. A black SUV pulled up, headlights cutting sharp lines across the dark wood exterior of the cabin. Brandon stepped out first, leather jacket slung over one shoulder, suitcase and a small gift bag in hand. Elise followed, bouquet of pale pink tulips cradled against her chest. They laughed as they approached the front door, the sound slicing through me like a knife. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Elise froze mid-step. Her smile collapsed. Brandon bumped into her back, then looked up and stopped cold. His eyes met mine across the room. The gift bag slipped from his hand, the champagne bottle inside rolling across the hardwood and smashing into pieces, the sharp tang of alcohol filling the silence. The petals of Elise's flowers fell like soft wreckage onto the floorboards. I stood slowly, voice calm and low. Welcome to your weekend getaway. We've prepared wine, chairs, and the truth. Brandon stood motionless, mouth pressed into a thin, bloodless line. Elise staggered back a step, looking from me to Nathan as panic swept across her face. Nathan didn't move. I walked forward, slowly, deliberately, and placed a thick manila envelope on the table between the 4 untouched wine glasses. Brandon's voice cracked first. Lauren, this isn't what you think. I tilted my head, eyes cold and sharp. Then what is it? The texts? The hotel receipts? The Uber trips to her neighborhood? Are those not what I think either? Nathan stood beside me, his voice a low growl. And what about me, Elise? You told me you were going to a women's leadership conference. You even texted me, "Good night, I miss you," before turning your phone off. Was I imagining that too? Elise crumbled into the nearest chair, hands covering her face. Nathan, please what? His voice hardened, distant now. Please don't stand here and look at the ruins of my marriage. Please don't see what you've been doing in the very cabin I designed with my own hands. Brandon lunged forward, flipping open the envelope. Printed texts, screenshots, photos, a copy of the company event roster showing both him and Elise present at a guys-only weekend trip. His eyes reddened as he threw the pages down onto the floor. You were spying on me? I stared directly into him. I verified the truth because you spent so much energy hiding it. You left me no choice. Elise sat silent, hair falling in messy waves over her flushed cheeks. Nathan stared out the window, jaw clenched. How long, Elise? He whispered, never turning around. Her voice barely escaped her lips. 7 months. My heart tightened, but my face never changed. Brandon stepped toward me, as if closing the distance could somehow soften the blow. Lauren, I was wrong, but I never stopped loving you. I stepped back sharply. If that's what you call love, dragging another woman to the same cabin where I lost our child, you can keep it. The air collapsed into suffocating silence. I stared hard at Brandon. You can leave now or sit and hear the rest. Either way, there's nothing left to salvage here. Nathan turned slowly from the window, weary and broken. I need air. I nodded. So do I. We stepped out into the icy wind, walking side by side down to the shoreline without speaking. I don't know how long we stood there, 2 strangers who had been handed a grief neither of us asked for. The dark water reflected the moonlight, as still and indifferent as the sky above. When we returned, Elise and Brandon remained seated where we had left them, no longer speaking, not even looking at each other. I walked to the table and placed a second folder down in front of Brandon. Nathan, you may want to hear this too. I glanced up at Elise. You might not know this, but 6 years ago, Brandon accumulated over $42,000 in gambling debt. His parents paid it off behind closed doors to protect his career. I had to separate our finances, not out of suspicion, but because I saw firsthand what he was capable of hiding. Brandon stiffened, his face twisting. That has nothing to do with tonight. I narrowed my eyes. Doesn't it? You cheated and then tried to rationalize it by calling me distant, cold. But you forgot to mention to your mistress that I've been paying this cabin's mortgage by myself for the last 3 years while you lied and played poker with your friends in Colorado Springs. Brandon's head fell forward, silent and ashamed. Nathan looked straight at Elise. And you told me the bank delayed the loan for the roof repairs, but you wired nearly $10,000 to a rehab center in Spokane. The recipient, Jackson Carrington. That's your brother, isn't it? Elise looked up, pale and exhausted. I didn't want you to worry. No, Nathan said firmly. You didn't want to tell me the truth. His voice softened, bitter and hollow. You've been living 2 separate lives for months. One with me, one with him, both built on lies. The room fell into absolute silence. I nodded slightly. You two have never even been honest with each other, and certainly not with us. Elise broke down completely. I never meant for it to go this far. I stared at her coolly. But you let it. And now you don't even have the courage to admit it out loud. Do you know what hurts more than betrayal? Realizing that the person you loved isn't even brave enough to admit they did it. Brandon's eyes were rimmed red. I'm sorry, Lauren. I truly am. I stared back without flinching. Sorry doesn't change the truth. Love, if it ever existed, can't save a marriage that has already rotted from the roots. Nathan stood no longer angry, just exhausted. Elise, he said, do you know what hurts the most? It's that you never once considered telling me. You just decided for both of us. Elise hesitated, trembling. There's something I haven't told you yet, Nathan frowned. What? Elise's voice cracked as she whispered, barely audible. I'm pregnant. The room froze. Time itself seemed to stop. Brandon stood, stunned. What did you just say? I found out last week. I was going to tell Brandon this weekend. She turned slowly to Nathan, her eyes pleading. But it's yours. I'm sure. Brandon and I always use protection. Nathan staggered back like she had struck him physically. The baby's mine? Elise nodded, biting back tears. Yes. For the first time, I felt completely numb. I couldn't speak. I couldn't think. The one outcome I had not prepared for. An unborn child. Brandon's face twisted in disbelief. You're saying you cheated on me, and you're pregnant with his child? Elise's tone turned cold, suddenly fierce for the first time. I never lied to you about my feelings. I was wrong, but at least I never lied about what I wanted. Nathan turned away, fists clenched in silent agony. I looked at Brandon and finally found my voice. This is over. I reached into my bag and pulled out the final folder. This is the divorce petition. All the financial documentation is complete. My attorney has already reviewed everything. I'm giving you the option to sign now or later. I will not change my decision. Elise collapsed back into the chair, instinctively wrapping her arms around her stomach. Nathan, his voice hollow, stared at her. I'll need time to process this, but if you are keeping the baby, I will take responsibility. The child isn't at fault. I nodded slowly. That's the only decent thing any of us can do tonight. The silence that followed was oppressive, thick, heavy with the weight of everything left unsaid. I stood, calm and steady, watching Brandon slump back into the chair across from me, defeated. Elise sat motionless, one hand protectively resting on her stomach. Nathan stared at the floor. arms crossed tightly across his chest, as if bracing himself against a bitter wind that had blown through and stripped everything bare. I turned to Brandon, my voice quiet but firm. If you have anything else to say, say it now. He raised his head slowly, eyes hollow and drained of the arrogance they once held. Lauren, we had so many good years. We built a life. Does all of this really have to end? I tilted my head, studying him like a stranger. You're right, Brandon. We had so many good years, and you chose to gamble them away for cheap thrills, for a secret life that you couldn't even fully commit to. You've answered your own question. Nathan exhaled, shoulders heavy with exhaustion. I'll be in the car. He turned toward me. Lauren, if you ever want to talk after this, you know how to reach me. I nodded, grateful for his quiet strength. Elise stood awkwardly, wringing her hands. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I never thought it would go this far. I locked eyes with her, my voice calm and crystal clear. The most dangerous people aren't the ones who admit they're bad, they're the ones who convince themselves they're good, even while they lie and betray the people who love them. Elise froze, her mouth slightly open, unable to respond. I pulled a pen from my coat pocket and signed the final page of the divorce documents. As I placed the pen down, I realized something deep inside me had shifted. I felt lighter than I had in years. Not happy, not yet, but free. Brandon sat in stunned silence. I took one final look at him, the man I had once trusted with my entire future. Good luck, Brandon, I said softly. You're going to need more than that. Without waiting for a reply, I left. Nathan was waiting at his car, engine running. As I climbed into the passenger seat, neither of us spoke. The sound of gravel crunching under the tires as we pulled away was the only sound that filled the cold night air. We drove down the mountain roads in silence, the dark forest sliding past the windows like shadows fleeing from the rising moon. At the edge of Grand Lake, Nathan glanced over at me. There's a diner in town. Nothing fancy, but their chicken soup isn't bad. You hungry? A small, broken laugh escaped me, the first genuine sound of relief I had made in weeks. Starving. We sat side by side in the warm, yellow glow of the tiny mountain diner. The waitress, unaware of the wreckage we had just walked away from, smiled and poured steaming bowls of soup. We didn't talk about Brandon or Elise. We talked about other things. Nathan's abandoned dream of going to pastry school, my own dream of opening a bookstore cafe in Santa Barbara, a dream Brandon had dismissed as unrealistic. After dinner, Nathan walked me to my car. We've walked through the worst night of our lives together, he said quietly. We don't owe each other anything, but I think we found something rare, a friend who understands. I nodded. A friend who gets it without needing to say anything. We shook hands, no lingering glances, no promises, just a mutual understanding. I watched him disappear into the night, and for the first time in a long time, I felt steady. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of my small beach house in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, a cup of hot tea warming my hands as I watched the waves of the nearby lake crash softly against the shore. The early morning mist drifted across the water like soft whispers of a past life I had finally let go. The divorce had been finalized within 2 months. Brandon didn't fight. I think he knew dragging it out would only make him lose more. I had secured the majority of our joint assets, including a one-time buyout for the Grand Lake cabin, which I later sold back to him. I had no interest in keeping a house filled with ghosts. I heard through old mutual contacts that Brandon had quietly lost his shot at a promotion after his boss discovered the scandal at an internal company event. No one publicly acknowledged it, but Brandon's name slowly disappeared from the big projects. He went from next in line for executive director to quietly managing a second-tier team. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt nothing. A few weeks ago, I received a text from Nathan. Baby's here. Healthy. A girl. Emotions are everywhere, but we're figuring it out. Attached was a photo of a tiny newborn hand gripping Elisa's finger, Nathan smiling into the camera with a tenderness I'd never seen before. I don't know if they stayed together as a couple, but I do know they finally faced each other with honesty, even if it came too late. As for me, I chose solitude, not loneliness. My small home by the water became my sanctuary. I left the rigid corporate world behind and started working as a freelance financial advisor, helping women recover after divorce, not as some cold numbers expert, but as someone who understood the hollow fear of starting over. I had walked through the fire and come out on the other side. Nathan and I kept in touch. Never romantic, just rare, quiet friendship. A text on Thanksgiving. A quick call. Sometimes only a photo of a cabin somewhere with a caption. Thought you'd appreciate this one. We didn't need more. We had already walked through the longest night of our lives together. One spring morning, I woke up earlier than usual, not for work, not for anyone, just because I wanted to savor the stillness. Golden sunlight spilled into my living room as I curled up in my armchair, a soft blanket over my legs, listening to the distant call of birds and the lapping of water against the shore. My heart no longer felt heavy. I no longer felt like the woman left behind. I had survived, and more than that, I had rebuilt. I remembered the last time I saw Brandon. It was at a financial charity event in Denver. We locked eyes across the room. He looked thinner, smaller somehow, like a man still searching for something he'd never find. As I passed him, he softly called, "Lauren!" I turned calmly. "Hello." "You look well," he said, hesitating. "I am well," I nodded. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." I gave him a soft, knowing smile. "I know, but you don't have to say it. That's the past. I live in the present now." He nodded and stepped back into the crowd, fading from my life forever. I opened the windows of my house wide every morning. I kept pots of lavender and herbs along my porch. I picked up my unfinished manuscript, started journaling again, and even wrote letters to my younger self, the 25-year-old who believed love meant sacrificing yourself to hold someone else together. I had learned the hardest lesson. Love doesn't last when honesty disappears. Sacrificing yourself for someone who wouldn't do the same only makes you forget your own worth. I started counseling divorced women, not as a cold voice of reason, but as a guide who had lived it, who understood the moments when your world collapses and you wonder if you'll ever feel whole again. They trusted me because I didn't just speak. I understood. One late afternoon, driving along the winding Colorado roads, an old song came on. "Dog Days Are Over" by Florence Welch. Brandon used to tease me for loving that song, called it too dramatic. I laughed as I turned up the volume and let the wind sweep through my hair. I had gone far enough from the past to look back at it without pain. I used to think losing someone you love was the end. But it isn't. It's just the end of something that no longer serves you, so something better can begin. If someone were to ask me now, "Lauren, do you regret anything?" I would answer without hesitation, no. Some people come into our lives not to stay, but to teach us how to leave at the right time. My story isn't a tragedy. It's a journey of rebirth. From a betrayed wife to a woman who stood back up, healed, and learned to love herself again. I don't resent the past. I don't seek revenge. I choose peace and a life I own. Every sunrise over Glenwood Springs reminds me, sometimes loss clears the way for something better. And I am so glad I had the courage to walk away when it mattered most.